Hey everyone, and welcome to another video in this rewriting series. Now, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one to rewrite your screenplay, there is a link below for more information on that. We can hop on a call and discuss working together. So if that's something that you're interested in, click that link below. Other than that, let's go ahead and get into the video here. So today what we're going to be talking about is fixing your scenes. So we're going to be fixing your scenes here. Now, what we're going to be doing, this is kind of going to be split up into two parts. So there's going to be this video, and then the one after this is I'm going to be talking more about dialogue, what's actually happening within a scene, and look at some scene examples. Whereas this, what I want to do is do a little bit more like diagnosis of the point of your scene, more a general overview of like, does this scene need to be in your story? What's the purpose of the scene before we go to the next step, right? So there's a couple like main kinds of scenes. So you have kind of like what I would consider a regular scene, right? So just, characters doing some of the things that they're doing, right? So, they're talking about an external conflict, they're having some sort of, whatever, a scene that takes us kind of from point A to point B. And then what we also have is our pivotal scenes, right? So what I mean by pivotal scenes is these are your big scenes that are huge story turns and are likely going to have more levels of conflict than maybe a regular scene might, right? So first off, on both of these, right, every single scene in your story does need to have some sort of point, right? Like there needs to be a reason that that scene is in there, obviously. Okay, so really scenes are going to be doing, one thing most of the time, right? And especially for your regular scenes, they're going to be doing one specific thing, one specific task. So, we're moving external conflict forward. We're getting, new information that changes the story. A character, takes an action, these sorts of things. So like ultimately everything in your scene comes down to one single point. And this is an idea that I believe it's Truby talks about a lot. He likes to use a triangle, an upside down triangle like this. I believe Lessons from the Screenplay also made a video that's kind of similar to this, where this is your scene and you kind of start up here with the general scene action, and then you come all the way down to the point of that scene, and then we move on, right? So new information learned, character makes a choice, character takes an action, and then essentially everything above that is deliberation or the conflict that brings us to the point of the scene down here, right? So when you're looking at just the scenes in your story, right, there's some questions that you want to be asking yourselves, okay? So like, what is the one thing that this scene does, right? What do we learn? What action does the character take? How does the story progress because of this scene, right? And this doesn't have to be the most complicated thing ever, but when we're talking about a story turn, right? When we're saying a scene turns a story, what we're saying is that we leave this scene with something different in the world. Something has changed. It's character relationship, it's external plot, it's something philosophically, or it could be all three, right? So now when we're looking at pivotal scenes, right? Pivotal scenes are usually, what I'm saying here is when we have the external, internal, and philosophical conflict, usually all moves together. So like, what I'm saying here is that a character is making some sort of major choice, right? That then satisfies multiple levels of conflict or changes multiple levels of conflict. So what I'm talking about here is if we look at an example of Snowpiercer, right? When Curtis gets to the front of the train and meets Wilford, right? Then essentially Wilford offers him a choice, right? Wilford says, okay, you can either take over for me and run the system as I have run it, or, you can die, right? And obviously Curtis makes a choice in this moment to either do what Wilford has done, right? Continue the system or not continue the system, right? So essentially what's happened is that this scene is pivotal because externally, we are at the end of Curtis's external goal, right? His external goal was get to the front of the train. Internally, it's his friends, right? He's seen his friends die getting here, right? He's watched so many people that he loves make sacrifices to get him here. He feels the weight of those decisions, as well as seeing one of the children that was initially taken by one of his friends in this place at the front of the train, which then adds to the internal conflict here. And then it's the philosophical conflict, right? Wilford lays out a reality to Curtis, and Wilford's view of the world is essentially that the system must continue and that it is the only way for us to survive, right? So the train, and Snowpiercer being a microcosm of larger society, and that kind of being the metaphor of the story. But he's setting up that philosophical conflict. Should you continue the system as it is, where some people are suffering and some people, seem to be living better lives for the sake of us all moving forward? Or are you going to destroy that system at the risk of everyone dying and humanity potentially ending as we know it, right? So in this scene at the front of the train, it is now satisfying these three elements of conflict, right? And so this does not have to be your climactic scene, although obviously your pivotal scene will likely be a climax, or one of your climax will obviously be a pivotal scene, is what I mean here. But we can look at some other examples of this, right? So another pivotal scene that I have mentioned a lot is the Dark Knight interrogation scene that happens at the midpoint of the story, right? So externally, Batman has captured the Joker, and externally, the Joker has captured Harvey Dent and Rachel. And so now Batman is coming in to externally get information on them, right? Then internally, the conflict is that Batman is in love with Rachel and wants her to live, obviously, and wants to do whatever he can to save her because he's in love with her. And then philosophically, this is the point, this is the scene where the Joker lays out his worldview fully to Batman. He explains that the world of rules and the society that we live in is a fraud, right? This is his worldview. And that if you take away these rules from people, they will become monsters, right? They will, become animals. They will, eat each other is one of the things that he says, right? And so then Joker presents a choice to Batman, which is you must save either Rachel or Harvey Dent. And through this choice, what is he doing? He's challenging Batman's external stakes, right? Because he wants to save both of them ideally. Internally, because he wants to save Rachel because he is in love with her. And philosophically, because the Joker is trying to get Batman to break his one rule and to essentially accept Joker's view of the world. That is what he is trying to do. And so this is why the midpoint becomes such a pivotal scene in The Dark Knight, right? So this is what I'm talking about when we have pivotal scenes. Pivotal scenes are all these three stakes coming together to create a major turn in your story, right? So when you're trying to fix a pivotal scene, right, it becomes very simple again, right? Which is like, what is the one thing that's happening here that challenges all three stakes, right? Or all three levels of your story. Challenges all three levels of conflict, right? And so, with Curtis and Snowpiercer, the one thing is the choice he must make, right? And again, this is how it will usually work. And it's the same for the Dark Knight scene. The one thing that has to happen is the choice Batman must make at the end of this scene, right? And so that's what, again, coming back over here, when your scene has a point, and this point can be just external or just internal or just, philosophical, but ideally in a pivotal scene, it's all three. And honestly, the more scenes you can have that are, all three, a lot of the times this creates an overall stronger story. But that's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. But you want your pivotal scenes to be handling all three of these things, because this is what creates intense moments. And this is one of the reasons that like certain scenes feel so powerful, right? A pivotal scene feels so powerful because it's doing all of this. We see the external struggle, we see the internal struggle, and we see the philosophical struggle, all in this one beautiful moment where the character makes a choice and we are glued to the screen, right? And so that is how you need to be thinking about some of the big moving pieces of your story. So some of the big pivotal scenes will likely be at your midpoint, will likely be at your climax, obviously. And then there are some others. So, your break into Act 2 from Act 1 can be one of these moments. Your break into Act 3 from Act 2 can be one of these moments. Your inciting incident can also be one of these moments. But this is what you want to be thinking about as you are building that story. Ultimately, though, this idea of one thing, I want you to be really thinking about this as you're handling your scenes, because what happens a lot of times is people get all over the place and they don't create one specific point for their scene. And then because of that, it seems unfocused or it seems like nothing happens. A lot of the time, scripts that I will read from clients, they just have a lot of scenes where nothing is really changing in the story. And if you have like a real change in the story on some level, external, internal, philosophical, then, that scene can be working. But ultimately you have to actually have that one thing going on. So this is more of a view of your scenes within a structural framework, or like within the point of those scenes, right? Because how we're looking at your story is we are, going down the line of saying, okay, from the big wide range, right? What's my theme? What's my philosophical conflict? Then what are my characters' beliefs? Then how is that fitting into a structure? Understanding, what genre I'm in. And then now we're saying, okay, what are the point of my individual scenes? Do they actually have a point in regards to these other more important pieces that are happening in my story? And then how do I decide what scenes need to be there, what scenes don't need to be there, and what scenes need to be reworked, right? And so essentially what you're doing when you're rewriting is just asking yourself questions about your scenes based upon these ideas. So like, you can ask yourself, what is the turning point in this scene? How does this scene turn the story? What's the point of this scene, right? Then you can also ask yourself, what levels of conflict does this scene handle, right? And the more that you do this, the more that you can do this more naturally, and you don't have to be so, constantly analytical, but knowing how to be analytical is going to be helpful for you to solve problems. And what you're doing in the rewriting process is you're bringing in that editor, you're bringing in that analyzer to help you solve problems. And so I don't want you to overcomplicate it more than this, right? Your scene needs to have a point, right? You need to understand what that point is and be able to articulate it. It needs to be related to 1, 2, or 3 of these stakes right here. A lot of your scenes will, only handle your external. Some of your scenes will only handle your internal. Usually your scenes are not only handling your philosophical conflict, although sometimes you will have characters that are just, arguing about specifically the philosophical conflict. But it needs to be about one of these things. Your scene has a point, and then your pivotal scenes will handle all 3. And so don't overcomplicate it any more than that, right? The enemy of your script being good is you trying to overcomplicate everything every single time and making the most, just complicated story ever. It doesn't work. Keep things simple. When you keep things simple, you're able to go back and problem solve. Now, in the next video, what I'm going to do is take a look at some scenes and just kind of scroll through them. We're going to listen to dialogue. We're going to actually talk about the flow of a scene, and take a more granular look at a scene by itself versus this, which is more of your scene as part of your larger structure. Hopefully that makes sense. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one to rewrite your screenplay, then click the link below this video, and I will see you guys in the next video.